subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. Hello, Sasuke, the voice of a girl with golden hair and eyes as blue as the sky rang out. It was our main character, Naruto Uzumaki. She jumped down from a tree to her friend, who was sitting under a tree and resting from Sakura and her eternal, Sasuke-kun. Sitting down next to him, the girl put her head on his shoulder and sighed. "How are you, Uchiha?" Sasuke asked quietly that he knew perfectly well about the condition of his girlfriend and named sister. Recently, the Fourth World War of Shinobi in Naruko died down. With the help of her forces she defeated the enemy, but it turned out very much for her, although she also had advantages. The first plus, now she has Rinne, Sharingan and Tenseigan. The strongest eyes in the world. The first ones were from the creator of the Shinobi world, and the second ones are rare. The second plus, she was able to awaken several more types of chakras in herself, besides air. The chakras of wood, fire, and lightning were added to them. The third plus, she was able to seal the ten-tailed in herself, so she is the Jinchuriki of Kurama and Jubi. So she got even more chakra. And now let's move on to the cons. The first disadvantage is that there are so many chakras that her body just can't stand it. A little more time and the body will simply explode, destroying everything in its path. The second disadvantage is that Sasuke is the conductor of her chakra, which is why he also suffers. Not really, it could have been better. By the way, Kurama and Jubi said that they have some idea about this. Ju.2 Biju appeared in their mini versions and sat on Naruko's lap, taking the chakra for themselves. Yes, you're right, we have an idea. We can help you with your problem, but your chakra will be needed. We would like to offer you to get into the past and start all over again, only in the past, not of this universe, but in another, where your parents are alive. The Uchiha clan, Uzumaki, are not destroyed. You need a lot of chakra to move, so in the new world you will not have so much chakra. We will go with you too and help in everything. And now you need to decide what you will do. Go back in time or perish in this world, Kurama said and disappeared with Jubi. Naruko and Sasuke got up and, holding hands, went to their home, quietly talking about this topic. "I don't want to die here, so I'll probably agree." Sasuke stopped and looked at the girl and smiled. "I'm with you wherever you go." Naruko smiled and nodded her head and went to their house, where they began to collect all the things in the seal that were on their body. After leaving the house, they sealed the house as well. "Let's go for a walk for a while," the blonde asked softly and smiled sweetly, to which Sasuke patted her hair and squatted in front of her, thereby showing her to climb on his back, picked up under his feet when she jumped on his back. Sasuke began to walk slowly, listening to what Naruko was saying, who was chirping about something. The villagers looked at them with surprise, and some were touched and said that they would make a good couple. Time passed quickly and now they were sitting on Mount Hokage and looking into the distance, meeting the dawn. "Well, let's go to the Hokage," the girl asked, and together they went to the residence. After knocking, they entered and smiled when they saw their team. "Hello, Hokage-sama," Naruko said, which caused everyone to look at her in shock, since she never called her godmother Hokage-sama. "Naruko and I decided to leave the village for a while, going on a journey to find our way and strength for further life," Sasuke said, and Naruko nodded and squeezed the guy's hand, who smiled after looking at her. "Naru, is everything okay?" Uchiha asked with concern, noticing how her eyes began to change from ordinary to legendary and back again. Putting his hand on her eyes, Sasuke began to take away the chakra from them so that they would not show up for a while. "When are you leaving?" Tsunade asked, looking at Naruko with concern. "In the evening, that's why we came to say goodbye to you," Naruko answered, who sighed wearily and smiled faintly. "Okay," said Hokage, and the whole team was still silent, not understanding anything. Naruko and Sasuke left the residence, where the team caught up with them. Sakura, as always, wanted to hit Naruko, but the black-haired man stood between them and grabbed the pink-haired woman's hand. "Don't you dare hit her, Hirono," Uchiha spat out and squeezed the girl's hand. "Her chakra," Kakashi said, looking at his student and his teacher's daughter. He noticed that the chakra had grown to a colossal size. Sasuke let go of his former partner's hand and approached Naruko, taking her by the hand, and then Kakashi noticed a plexus of chakra that poured into Sasuke. "We're leaving now, goodbye." Sasuke carefully picked up Uzumaki in his arms and ran to the exit of the village. As soon as they ran 3 kilometers away from the village, hiding their chakra, they sent a letter telling the whole truth. POV of Kakashi. "Hello, Hokage-sama," Kakashi-sensei, Naruko said, which is why we all looked at her in shock, since she never called her godmother Hokage. "Hokage-sama, Naruko and I decided to leave the village for a while, going to travel to find our way and strength for further life," Sasuke said. And Naruko nodded and squeezed the guy's hand, who smiled after looking at her. Although I noticed that there was concern in his eyes. "Naru, is everything okay?" Uchiha asked with concern, to which I frowned harder. Putting his hand on her eyes, Sasuke began to take the chakra from them. "When are you leaving?" Tsunade asked, looking at Naruko with concern. "In the evening, that's why we came to say goodbye to you," Naruko answered, who sighed wearily and smiled faintly, leaning slightly on Sasuke. "Okay," said Hokage, and we were still silent, not understanding anything. Naruko and Sasuke left the residence. After saying goodbye to the Hokage, Sakura and I also left. As soon as we got out, Sakura ran at Naruko with her fist raised. She tried to hit, but Sasuke stepped between them and intercepted her hand. "Don't you dare hit her, Hirono," Uchiha spat out and squeezed the girl's hand. "Her chakra," I said, looking at my student and my teacher's daughter. I noticed that the chakra has grown to a colossal size. Sasuke let go of his former partner's hand and approached Naruko, taking her by the hand, and then I noticed a plexus of chakra that poured into Sasuke. "We're leaving now, goodbye." Sasuke carefully picked up Uzumaki in his arms and ran to the exit of the village. I stood there in shock and realized that it was over. Then a toad appeared in front of me and handed me a letter. I noticed an inscription on it. "For friends." Cursing, I grabbed Hirono and went back to the office of Hokage, who was looking out the window. "Hokage-sama, Naru and Sasuke sent us a letter as they left the village, and it says on it that we should tell our friends everything." Hokage nodded, and 10 minutes later, my students' friends were in the office. After handing the letter to Tsunade, I watched her open it. "Hi guys. We are now writing this letter with Naruko, waiting for our end. We don't know how much we have left, but very little. I understand that you don't understand anything, but I'll tell you now while Naru is sleeping, resting from the pain that causes the chakra. After the Shinobi War, Naruko took over the entire power of Kagaya Otsutsuki, Madara Uchiha and Obito Uchiha. Plus, she sealed Jubi inside herself. In short, Naruko has so much chakra right now, which is why her body can't stand the load and is ready to explode at any moment. After that battle, the Trinity appeared before us and told us how to restrain Naruko's forces. We need to become a guide for her chakra, and I agreed. We've been coping with this for 3 months, but alas, I can't cope anymore because her chakra is killing me too, but you know, I don't regret it. I'm going to die for Naru because she's the only friend I can rely on. Below I have listed the pros and cons of her strength." Tsunade read it and drank some water and continued reading. "The first plus, now she has Rinne, Sharingan and Teisenga. The strongest eyes in the world. The first ones were from the creator of the Shinobi world, and the second ones are rare." The second plus, she was able to awaken several more types of chakras in herself, besides air. The chakras of wood, fire, and lightning were added to them. The third plus, she was able to seal the ten-tailed in herself, so she is the Jinchuriki of Kurama and Jubi. So she got even more chakra. And now let's move on to the cons. The first disadvantage is that there are so many chakras that her body just can't stand it. A little more time and the body will simply explode, destroying everything in its path. The second disadvantage is that I am the conductor of her chakra, which is also why I suffered. I hope you'll forgive us for hiding it, but we didn't want you to worry about us. A couple of days before we left the village, Kurama and Jubi came to us and offered to be reborn in the past of another universe. We will remember everything, our families will be alive. We didn't hesitate for a long time, so we agreed. Naru and I took our house, the scrolls with the techniques of the Uzumaki, Uchiha and Otsutsuki clans, for which we apologize, but we don't want anything to remain that reminds us of us. So there aren't any in the vault either. Smiling face with horns. Oh, Naru woke up and again does not overcome the pain. Lord, how happy I am that we disappear from this time, because I'm tired of Haruno hitting my little sister, who is so hurt. If she tries to hit her tomorrow, I'll kill everyone, but I hope I hold back, and this chicken will have brains. Goodbye, friends. Tsunade finished reading, and I lowered my head. What kind of mentor am I if I didn't notice it? I said, sitting on the couch with my hands clenched into a fist. Then I noticed how her eyes flashed angrily and opened her mouth. How dare he? She didn't finish because I pinned her to the floor with my chakra. Shut up, Haruno, I said threateningly and loomed over her. What do you know about them? Nothing. All you can do is, oh, Sasuke-kun, let's go on a date. All I hear from you is the name of Uchiha, and I haven't heard normal words from you more than once. I was given my command that even after graduating from the academy, I didn't even try to do anything on my exam. Hokage-sama, I want to give up the position of mentor of team number 7 and return to ANBU. Tsunade looked at me and her student with shock and closed her eyes. Okay, from now on, you're ANBU again, you know where to go. Bowing, I disappeared. The last thing I noticed was that everyone was looking accusingly at the evil Sakura, and then they left. POV and, meanwhile, Naru and Sasuke called Kurama and Jubi, who began to perform the ritual of displacement. Naruko's POV. Opening my eyes, I looked around and heard a scream, Naruko, go eat and get ready for the academy. Realizing that it was my mother's voice, I sobbed and burst into tears. Then Kurama's voice rang in my head, asking me to go down to him. Closing my eyes, I found myself in my subconscious and winced, as it was different from my previous subconscious. There were cracks where small streams of chakra flowed from. Frowning, I walked into the room and froze when I saw the cage on Kurama and Jubi. Frowning, I went to the cage and with the help of my fox's tails, rose to the seal and instantly pulled it off, not feeling the chakra of Kurama and Jubi spread throughout the house and not knowing that my parents ran into my room and froze in shock, noticing that I was sitting in the lotus position, rising into the air, and the chakra of Kurama and Jubi was curling around me. Closing my eyes, I began to change my subconscious. What happened? Ju, the Biju warmed up and settled comfortably on the grass. In addition to the seal that was from that world and the one that restrained us, you have another one. This is the seal from the owner of this body. Over there, Ku pointed to the door. Walking up to her, I looked her over. Ku, patch up the chakra channels. Biju nodded and began to patch up, and I looked at the seal and frowned. What does she keep there? Since such complex seals. Approaching the seal, I touched it and winced in pain. Damn, my chakra is not enough for this yet. Then I was called, Naruko, we are all. Now the whole life of this body will flash before your eyes. Closing my eyes, I began to look at the memories and frowned harder. It turns out I have an older brother who loves me. My father considers it a ballast, and my mother loves it, although she tries not to show it in public. In this world, every person has their own soulmate. His name appears on his wrist at the age of 12. Difficult. Okay, I'm off. Little foxes. Returning to the real world, I saw my parents standing with weapons ready, waiting for Kurama to break free. Sighing, I got up and went to the closet, where I began to put on clothes. Wincing at the black flowers, I sighed again and went into the bathroom, where I washed and dressed and went out to my shocked parents. Good morning. Passing by them, I took their kunai from their hands and went to the kitchen, where there were 3 bowls. Sitting down at the table and putting kunai next to her, she began to eat, ignoring the looks on herself. There was a knock, and I smiled. Jumping up from the table, I opened the door and hung on to the brunette, who put his arm around my waist and twirled in the air, ignoring the looks of my parents. "Sasuke, have you eaten yet?" The brunette nodded and looked me up and down and snorted. "I know it sucks, but as you can see, I have only such clothes in my wardrobe. I need to go to the store later," Sasuke snorted, to which I rolled my eyes, studying and going out with him on the street, walking towards the academy. Entering the classroom under the surprised looks, we sat down together, holding hands. POV end, the brunette and the blonde sat together all day and felt the gaze from the street. They understood perfectly well that it was an ANBU, set up to protect the daughter of Hokage. "Sasuke, what do you think we'll buy today?" Sasuke mentally chuckled, and Naruko smiled, which made the classroom quiet, because Naruko had never smiled, and here, a bright and joyful smile. "I will not live on the territory of the Uchiha clan, as everyone despises me, thinking that I do not have a Sharingan." Nodding to him, Nara shook her head. "I think I'll leave my parents too. I'll quarrel with them and leave. Our house is waiting for us." Sasuke smiled and squeezed the hand of his sister-in-law. So, the couple sat until the end of classes. "Well, will we show everyone our strength tomorrow, at the exam?" Sasuke asked, to which Naruko laughed and raised her head to the sky. "Oh, by the way, there's my father and your parents. Shall we put on a show?" Naruko arched her eyebrows playfully and grinned. "Why not?" Holding hands, they went to their parents to ignore them. Passing by, "Naruko, stop, immediately," the fourth Hokage ordered. Sasuke and Naruko stopped. The girl smiled, hiding her smile, not turning to face her father, but Sasuke turned and tilted his head to the side, flashed a Mangek Sharingan from under his bangs. "And why are you ordering my sister? Who are you to order her around?" The voice was rough, cold and indifferent, although there was a smile on his face that made him feel cold. Minato gathered himself and said, "I am her father and have the right to show her." From his words, even the Uchiha looked at him with shock. Sasuke laughed. "What do you know about your daughter? What does she like?" Minato didn't understand why he was listening to this. "Black color and strawberries." Then Sasuke looked at Naruko and knelt down in front of her. "I'm of the Uzumaki clan, Senju, I am delighted with you." Bursting into laughter, Naruko bowed and turned to face her father, showing legendary eyes, which caused everyone to fall to their knees. The Uchiha looked at Naruko with admiration, as such eyes are a legend. "You know, Daddy, I hate black, I like orange more. And I'm allergic to strawberries, I love oranges and tangerines." Naruko approached her father and leaned towards him slightly, which is why everyone saw the three coats of arms of the Uchi, Senju, Uzumaki clans. "Whatever you want, Daddy, but I'm tired of it, I'm leaving home, since I have a place to live." "Yes, Sasuke." Sasuke nodded his head. Then a voice rang out, "Sis, can I come with you?" Turning around, the girl looked at the exact copy of her mother and broke into a smile. Akira's little brother, hanging on to him with a running start. Naruko smiled. "Of course you can. We have enough room for a whole clan. For example, Uzumaki." Smiling cheerfully, the girl grabbed Akira and Sasuke by the hand and walked with them towards the polygons. Finding a boring one, she stopped and rolled up her sleeves, which is why Akira and Sasuke noticed bruises and cuts. After exchanging glances, the guys nodded to each other. The guys noticed that their parents were watching them. Naruko, meanwhile, touched her hand and a seal appeared on it. She sparkled with all colors and a huge house appeared in front of the Trinity. "Wow, where did you dig it up?" Naru and Sasuke slyly exchanged glances and entered the house and smiled. Naru went into the kitchen and looked at the wall, where all the people close to her are depicted. Touching the wall, she, with the help of the chakra, placed the image of her brother. When the guys went into the kitchen, they saw that Naruko was cooking. "What are you cooking?" Sasuke asked, walking up to the named sister and hugging her around the waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Ah, tomato salad for you. Pie with oranges and tangerines. Potatoes with meat for the second, miso soup for the first, as well as your favorite salad." Akira and I call those who are watching us, otherwise they are already fed up. Akira nodded and left the house to return with his parents and older brother Sasuke and his father. Naru looked at them and chuckled, continued to cook, while giving the impudent hands that steal tomatoes. Sasuke, show the guests the bathroom where they can wash their hands and wash it yourself, otherwise I won't let them sit at the table. Sasuke pulled away and went to show, looking askance at Naruko, that she smiled. POV Sasuke. When Naru told me to take the guests to wash their hands, I took them to the second floor. Walking up the stairs, I noticed glances on the wall, as there were photos and drawings on it. For example, at the very beginning of the photo of little Naru with smiling parents who died a couple of hours after the photo was taken. Then she was already with the third one who fed her sweet oranges. There were also photos of her eating ramen. There were our joint photos, but my favorite one was at the very top. When I reached the end, I stood in front of the image and touched it, smiling. There's a pregnant Naruko and I, hugging her, putting my hands on her tummy. Yes, in the past we could have had a child, but because of the war, the child died without being born. Then Naruko and I talked and decided to stay friends. Clenching my hand into a fist, I looked at my relatives and sighed, "We'll tell you everything later." "Who are these people?" "Come on in." I nodded at the door, and I went down and went into the kitchen, hugged Nara, who shuddered, standing near the window and trembled. "Naru, everything is fine, I promise that we will cope with everything." Naruko looked at me and smiled faintly. "Sasuke, I'm tired," she said, falling into my arms, falling asleep. Activating the Sharingan, I examined her and frowned, picked her up in my arms and went to the room where we slept together. Yes, we slept together, because after the war, Naru had nightmares. Climbing the stairs, I froze, looking at our families and sighing, went into the room under their surprised looks. After laying my Nara down, I sat down next to her and began stroking her hair, since she wouldn't let me go. Sighing, I lay down next to her and hugged her to me, stroking her back. "Ku, get out," I said, looking at the two foxes that settled down next to Naru, taking my place. On the appearance of the Biju chakra, Rodax ran into the room that were ready to kill Naru. After looking at them with a frown, I got out of bed, carefully freeing my t-shirt from her tenacious fingers. When I left the room, I pulled out my parents as well. "Go away, and do not appear in our lives anymore." Turning around, I looked at my older brother, my former lover, and then pointed to the door. "Your room is there. And you, eat and leave." Going downstairs, I sat down at the table and began to eat salad and everything else. As soon as we started doing it, Naru came into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes with her fist. Smiling at this, I patted my knees, where Naru sat down and snuggled up to me, began to give her chakra, which began to grow again. "Naru, we will have to make a call soon. They will take, for a while, half of your chakra." Naruko nodded, sleepily snuggling up to me, to which I put my arm around her waist and began to feed her, smiling cheerfully under the surprised looks. Topic, and Ku said, "Who will be our soulmates?" Frowning at her words, I sighed. "Naru, it's all later, but now eat, you need to, otherwise you're too light for your age." Naru frowned and ate my tomato, which I wanted to eat. Shaking my head at her childishness, I smiled. My parents are probably in shock, since Uchiha never talk much and hide their emotions behind a mask, but I'm a different case. With Naruko, I can't be the same as my clan members. Then Naru sat up and looked out the window. Her eyes were wide open. Jumping up, she jumped out of the window, and we all followed. We found ourselves near the entrance to the village and looked into the distance, together with Naruko, who shone before our eyes. "The mark of the Uzumaki clan shone, grandfather," she exclaimed and rushed to the exit, where the Uzumaki clan was in full force. Hanging onto the head of the clan, she hugged him. "Hello, Haim," said the head of the clan. Looking at Minato, I chuckled when I saw how pale he was. "Della, you will live with me," she exclaimed and dragged them after her, into our house. Sighing, I followed her, catching up with her in a couple of steps and taking her by the hand, breaking her. "Haim, stop, they still have to go to the residence to notify the head of the village that they will live here. Naru raised an eyebrow and pointed at her father. The head of the village is standing over there, ready to faint. Fuguka-san, Makoto-sama, Itachi-san, take your father home, he needs to rest. The Uchiha nodded, and Naru led all the Uzumaki, who are not so many, to our house. POV end. Naruko's POV. A year has passed since the day when the living Uzumaki came to our village and built their block near my house, clearing the landfill. Now I am 6 years old and today we will have a Chunin exam. By the way, we are the youngest who take this exam. Moreover, we graduated from the academy in a year, becoming geniuses for a new Itachi and II. After the academy, we were assigned to the first team, where Sasuke and I were, and our mentors were older brothers, that is, Itachi and Akira. For some reason, it seems to me that they were assigned to me because of suspicion of stealing the scrolls that were in the seal of this body. Today I decided to talk to Itachi, Akira, and my grandfather so that they could help me with this seal. So I called them. I was sitting in the kitchen, in the arms of Sasuke, who will also help with this. 10 minutes later, the invited guests came into the kitchen. Good afternoon. I would like you to go into my subconscious. Don't be afraid, I'll help. Putting my hand over my eyes, I immediately removed it, showing my eyes. Sasuke and Itachi immediately entered my subconscious, and I let Del and Akira in. We are all standing in front of Ku and Ju, who were frolicking until they noticed that they had guests. Naru? Did you decide to show it to them? Kurama looked towards the door, and I nodded. It was the same seal that kept something in itself, the body of the previous owner, and now, I'll tell you something. No one else should know about this until a certain moment, or rather my 18th birthday. Everyone nodded except Biju and Sasuke, who knew everything. Sasuke immediately came up to me and called for a chair, seating me on it. I wanted to tell you who we are and why it looks older. I, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruko, the heroine of the 5 nations, who lost her parents on the day of her birth. My parents, Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, sealed Kurama in me. Throughout my life, I was an outcast in Konoha, as there was no one to protect me. My parents died. The Uzumaki clan was dead before I was born. I could have been taken by the Uchiha clan, but the council, headed by Danzo, forbade them, saying that the Uchiha clan would become stronger if they had the weapons of the village. I pointed at myself. I didn't know who my parents were until I was 10 years old, until I came down here and saw Kurama, with whom I made friends. Deciding to tear off the seal, I was stopped by the rest of my father's chakra, who told me who my parents were. Then there was a stream of missions, and so the time came to war. I sighed and looked away, and then Sasuke spoke up. Sasuke Uchiha, am the only survivor in the plan, since my older brother, by order of Danzo, killed the entire clan that was preparing a coup. With Naruko, we became team number 7, we had a ballast named Haruno Sakura in our team, who decided that I was her property, although she was clanless and it was disgusting to be with her then. Our mentor was Kakashi Hatake, a former student of the 4th Hokage. As Naruko said, we carried out many missions until Akatsuki began to attack the world, to capture Biju, so that later to immerse the world in the eternal Tsukiyomi. A year before the battle, Naru and I started dating and she was pregnant, but during the war, we lost our child. There are photos and drawings on the walls of the house. This is our life with Naru. I do not know by what miracle, but we defeated Uchiha Obito, Kagyu and Madara Uchiha. But there was one problem, all their power went to Naruko. Sasuke sighed, and I squeezed his palm, feeling how he intertwined our fingers. Smiling, I nodded to him. The first plus, now I have Rinne, Sharingan and Teisenga. The strongest eyes in the world. The first ones were from the creator of the shinobi world, and the second ones are rare. The second plus, I was able to awaken several more types of chakras in myself, besides air. The chakras of wood, fire, and lightning were added to them. The third plus, I was able to seal the ten-tailed in myself, so I'm Jinchuriki Kurama and Jubi. So I got even more chakra, and now let's move on to the cons. The first minus is that there are so many chakras that my body just couldn't stand it. A little more time and the body would simply explode, destroying everything in its path. The second minus, Sasuke became the conductor of my chakra, which is why he also suffers. Then this damn trinity came to us and offered Sasuke to become my guide, since we were equally strong and could balance our forces. He agreed and could calmly help for 3 months, and then it got worse and I had to use my chakra all the time, but still there was no result. Then Kurama and Jubi offered us one thing. Shifting my gaze to Kurama, I smiled. We offered them to go to the past of another universe, since the past of their time could not be changed, and here we had a chance to save Naruko and Sasuke. For this transfer, almost the entire reserve of Naruko was needed, which made her life easier until she was 18, and then we would have come up with something. They took all their belongings and scrolls with the techniques of the Uzumaki and Uchiha clans and went to the Hokage and said they were going on a trip and did not know when they would return. After they went far away and hid their chakra, they sent the toad with a letter, and then they were transported to this time. Only we had to transfer them, but it turned out that in the middle of the transfer they heard the call and they responded to it. So it turned out that the bodies of Naruko and Sasuke of this time were inhabited by Naruko and Sasuke from the future of another parallel. I do not know what happened to the souls of those Sasuke and Naruko. When I woke up, Jubi and I called Naruko here and told the whole story of this body. The father constantly beat his daughter, Kushina loved, but tried not to show it in front of her husband. Only my older brother was always there and protected me. At her birth, the Kubi of that time damaged all the channels of the chakra, but my brother and I restored them. And then they showed this door with a seal. Since there was not enough chakra in Naru at that time, we decided to leave her, since she did not interfere with us, but now there is another choice, because Hokage put Itachi and Akira as her mentors so that they would follow her and understand if she stole some scroll. Kurama looked at the seal and sighed. Therefore, I would like you to help me open them without destroying the body and contents of the seals. Everyone listened attentively, and I got up and went to the seal, which stopped beating with current, showing that the chakra is enough to open it. Don't even think about it, Grandpa said, coming up to me and putting his hand on my shoulder. We will help. Smiling, I squeezed Sasuke's hand as he approached. You'd better be near the seal, and we'll probably start. Remembering something, I looked at Kurama, who nodded and ran away to return with a book. Taking it in my hands, I handed it to my grandfather. It might help you. Taking the notebook, grandfather nodded and began to leaf through it. My God, she was a genius. Smiling sadly, I looked at the leaves and went up to them and sat down on the grass, began to play with them, ignoring the glances that rested on my back. Then I shuddered and abruptly turned around, jumped up and ran to the seal, pushed everyone back. At that moment, the first seal flashed and opened the door, revealing many seals in it. I flew away from the chakra wave, crashing into Kurama, who helped me get up. At least you follow the chakra that flows in the seals. I shouted and went to the door and began to examine, and then closing my eyes, I put my hand forward and a seal appeared in front of her, which was the very first. Sitting down on the grass, I began to examine it. The others sat down next to me and began to look the same way. Consulting a notebook, I also examined the weaving. Shaking my head, I gently pulled the thread and immediately gasped, feeling pain all over my body. Looking at the seal with shock, I sighed and gave it to my grandfather, who found the right end with the help of Itachi, who found the end. 10 minutes later, all the feelings of this body flooded over me, which made me cry. Curled up on the grass, Naru, my older brother asked anxiously, sitting down next to me. Brother, did you know that she sealed all her feelings after her father raised his hand to her for the first time? Akira shook his head, and I sobbed and sat up straight and looked at the seal that was in my hands. From this seal there was a strong chakra and so familiar. Closing my eyes, I activated the Sharingan and began to untangle it, not allowing anyone to touch this seal. The seal flashed and a jar with eyes and a jar with ashes appeared in front of everyone. Pressing my eyes to myself, I looked at Itachi and handed the jar with the eyes to him. Transplant these eyes to yourself and scatter the ashes of Madara. I said, looking at Itachi, who was in shock. After another 3 hours, we opened almost all the seals. There were about 10 pieces left. We were able to find the stolen scroll and much more. Getting up from the grass, I went to the door and looked at the seal with the image of a heart. Touching it, I smiled when I saw the rest of the chakra of the mistress of this body. Hello. A voice rang out, causing everyone who was inside the consciousness to run up and freeze in shock. I am grateful to you that you fixed everything that I did. Ni-san, thank you for always being there for me, but I couldn't do it anymore. Father, at first he raised his hand at me, but then, when no one was at home, he came drunk and, she bit her lip. I felt defiled and dirty. I didn't leave my room for a month then. I have created many seals in my body. Once a masked man came to me and ordered me to steal a scroll from my father, and if I don't do it, he will kill my family. Even if my father didn't love me and ignored me, I loved every member of the family and didn't want them to die. I stole the scroll, but decided to give it to the masked man, a fake. I do not know why I collected everything, but I felt that it was all necessary, and as you can see, I was right. It wasn't me who needed them, but another Naruko. Naruko, please make peace with your father, because he is your mate. The father was born without a label, he would have lived to death without a soulmate. His mate was not me, but you from another world, so I ask you to make peace with him. And now, goodbye. I bit my lip and lowered my head, not noticing how Naruko disappeared, and the remaining seal opened. Closing my eyes, I returned to the real world and looked at everyone. When I left the house, I pushed everyone out of my mind. Walking through the streets of Konoha, I went to the residence. Going inside, I went to my father's office and froze at what I heard. Minato, I'm divorcing you. I got a soulmate name and this is Naruko's friend. Uchiha Sasuke. I smiled and closed my eyes, passing the information to Sasuke. Sighing, I opened the door and entered the office. Walking up to my mom, I looked into her eyes, and then looked down at the seal that was on her stomach. Touching her stomach, I activated the seal and got into her subconscious. Looking around, I looked at the kubis of this world and sighed. Kushina appeared next to him. Why are you here? I smiled and went up to Kyubi and touched his paw, began to absorb his entire chakra, feeling like Kurama takes the dark part of himself. Moving away, I looked at the crumbling Kyubi in the shocked Mom, go to Sasuke, I need to talk to my father. Kushina began to restrain herself. Mom, everything is fine, I promise, you will get a divorce and you will be happy. By the way, Sasuke is waiting near the entrance to the residence, so run and be happy, just please take care of him and don't kill him, as you like to do. Mom nodded and we disappeared from her subconscious. My mother begged and rode away on the wings of love, and I went up to my father, bypassing the table and sat down in front of him on the edge of his workplace, putting a seal on the door and windows. POV and POV Minato. I looked at my daughter and didn't understand anything. Tell me, Daddy, what is happiness? She smiled and looked at me. Daddy, tell me, what is love? She whispered softly, bending down to my face and licking my lips, looking at how my pupils must have become like a cat's. So answer me, Daddy. She whispered and bent down to my lips, kissed me, feeling me stiffen. What does that mean? I asked, putting my hand to my lips, and she smiled and jumped off the table, laughing, and ran away. My lips, themselves, broke into a smile. It was worth noticing the name on my wrist. Smiling, I looked at her and ran after her. Turning towards Hokage Mountain, she hid, feeling me catching up with her. Well, wait, I said, with a smile, finally catching her and pinning her to a tree, hovering over her. And what kind of games are these? I asked frowningly, although there was a fervent sparkle in his gaze. I feel like a pedophile. My daughter is only 10 years old, and I feel attracted to her and it scares me. These are not games, but this is the awakening of your mark. Smiling, she slipped out of my grip and went deeper into the forest. By the way, Father, when are you going to become the head of the Namake's clan? She asked, and I looked at her in shock. After all, everyone believes that the Namake's clan does not exist. I just shrugged at her question. When I reached her, I picked her up in my arms and went home. Now you live in our old house, and Kushina moves to the territory of the Uzumaki clan. I looked at Naruko and smiled, feeling her breath on my neck. When I got home, I went up to my room with Kushina and put my soulmate on the bed. Povn Naruko woke up from the fact that she was hot. Opening her eyes, the girl looked at the second part of the bed and smiled, looking at the sleeping Minato. Lifting her hand, she buried her fingers in his hair, gently fingering them. I'm sorry, she answered quietly and got out of bed, put on her father's shirt, before going to the bathroom and washing up. Going down to the first floor, Naruko entered the kitchen and began to cook dinner. Then Minato came down and froze, looking with admiration at Naruko, who was fluttering around the kitchen. Naruko, the blonde man said, and went up to the girl, picked her up in his arms and put her on the table, looked into her blue eyes, like his, and bent down and kissed her on the cheek. Dad, the girl said softly and pulled away, be patient until the age of 18, please. I'm not against all this, but Dad, I don't want bad rumors about you. Minato smiled and hugged his daughter, burying his face in the top of her head. Okay, Minato pulled away from his daughter and sat down at the table, looking at how plates of food were placed in front of him. Eat, and I'll go get ready. Going up to the room, Naruko stopped restraining the chakra that hid her growth. After waving a little, the girl put on her clothes that were sealed inside. After getting dressed, Naru saw her father and Sasuke talking about something. Approaching them, Naruko hugged Dad's hand and smiled at Sasuke, who snorted. Sasuke, have you decided everything? Winking cheerfully at her brother, the girl laughed, noticing a faint blush on her friend's cheeks. Yes, by the way, can we live in our house? Naru raised an eyebrow and frowned. Sasuke, this is our common house that we built together, so you have every right to live in it. Moreover, later I will live here. Naru nodded at the Hokage's house and smiled sweetly. Dad, you have to go, the girl said cheerfully and kissed her father on the cheek and went up to Sasuke. Together with him went towards the old house. When will we tell them the truth? Asked Sasuke, to which Naruko shook her head and sighed calmly. Not earlier than 18 years after going to Mount Hokage. Naruko stood on her father's head and put her hands to the sides and sang, if every king gave up his post to a lady, we would raise a toast with champagne in our hand for all the queens that go to the end. Baby, you're not dancing alone, you can't live without me, no matter how much you deny it. It's not funny and banal, you know, you're not the only king here, the whole body is shackled by trembling, there is no strength to endure, you will still understand what kind of queen do you live with. Not a lady that you will hide from trouble. I'll start breathing fire, you won't stop, let there be no sword in my hand, I'm rushing forward into battle, but if there was, it would be more than yours. If every king gave up his post to a lady, we would raise a toast with champagne in our hand for all the queens that go to the end. Baby, you're not dancing alone. A word by and, dear, a head off your shoulders. I will create a world in which you can't lie low, not a lady that you will hide from trouble. I'll start breathing fire, you won't stop. Even if there is no sword in my hand, I am rushing forward into battle. I've never been so alive. If every king gave up his post to a lady, we would raise a toast with champagne in our hand for all the queens that go to the end. Baby, you're not dancing alone, only a step is allowed on the chessboard and only queens go where they want. You're too close, you've reached this point, feel the taste of life and don't close your eyes. If every king gave up his post to a lady, we would raise a toast with champagne in our hand for all the queens that go to the end. Baby, you're not dancing alone. Everyone who was in the village heard the singing of the Hokage's daughter, with a blissful smile. Naru, do you feel something? Naru looked at her friend and smiled slyly. Maybe. I want to completely stop restraining the chakra on my growth. This body adapts to my soul and it's hard for me to restrain growth. 7 years have passed since that day. Naruko is now 17 years old. With the help of her chakra, Naruko was able to block her father's aging. So he looks 25 years old. Naruko spent all her time with her father in his office, sitting on his lap and helping with papers. During these 7 years, Naruko became a jonin. Minato, she called Naruko to her father and soulmate, in one person, noticing that he had dozed off, resting his head on her shoulder. Smiling, the girl called her clone, who became a guy and helped to transfer Minato to the sofa. Naruko sat on the sofa before that, and then put Minato's head on her lap. Naruko has been calling her father by name for 2 years. Then the door flew off its hinges and Akira came into the office, who froze under his sister's withering gaze. Sighing, he pulled the door back and put the team's mission report on his father's desk, and then left, quietly closing the door. "Did someone come?" asked the sleepy voice of Minato, who intercepted Naruko's hand and intertwining their fingers, kissed the ring on her finger. "This ring shows that she is already engaged." Akira came, broke down the door and brought a report. Minato laughed and raised himself on his elbows, kissed his daughter on the lips, immediately falling back into her lap, burying his face in her stomach. Naruko shook her head. "Minato, Sasuke and I are going to disappear for a while. Kurama and Jubi gave us the summoning scrolls." Minato looked at Naruko and nodded his head inside and buried himself in her tummy again. Naruko's POV: "After leaving my father's office, I went to the training ground, where Sasuke was already waiting for me." "Hi, Sasuke. Ready?" Sasuke just nodded and we opened the scrolls that Kurama gave us, but for some reason they gave me 4, and Sasuke too. After folding the seals, we called a couple of clones who took the other scrolls. Having folded the seals again, we disappeared. Looking around, I noticed the stares on me. Realizing that they were foxes, I blossomed before my eyes. "Kurama, you are a miracle." I shouted and looked at Ku, who appeared next to me. "Let's go." Kurama and I were walking towards the village. After an hour of walking, we were in the right place. All the sheets that Kurama saw froze, and then began to bow. "Mr. Kurama, why did you come to us?" a young fox, apparently the head of the village, asked. "I would like my Jinchuriki to sign a contract with you." Everyone immediately looked at me, and I was already playing with the little sheets that were inquisitive. "Okay, we'll sign a contract with her." "Sashin, bring the contract." Standing up, I looked at the fox who came up and how he unfolded it. After examining the contract, I bit through my finger and wrote my name in the contract. "Congratulations, you can call us whenever you want, even if you're bored." Beaming, I nodded my head and smiled. "Ku, why did you give me 4 summoning scrolls?" I asked when we got back. "I want you to have a few invocations, and they will empty your chakra a little." The next call was and I got to the toads. Seeing me, immediately began to run around me, saying something. Having signed a contract with them, I returned back. Sighing, I took the 3rd scroll from the clone's hands and folded the seals and found myself in an incomprehensible place. Kurama appeared nearby and took us to the village. It turned out to be a village of snakes. Then I saw Sasuke drinking tea. "Oh, Naruko, here you are. Go, they'll sign a contract with you." I blinked in surprise, went over and read the contract, signed with my blood, only to disappear immediately. The last scroll was familiar to me. When I folded the seal, I found myself in the forest and I could hear cawing everywhere. I went to the village alone and bowed to the main raven when I got there. "Would like to sign a contract with you, dear Raven." Raven tilted his head and accepted the contract I signed. Sighing, I listened to the lecture and disappeared. Appearing in his own world. Wearily sitting down under a tree, I closed my eyes, feeling the shadow on my face. Opening my eyes, I saw my father, who was smiling. "Well, did you sign it?" At his words, I nodded. "And with whom?" I thought about it and decided to be honest. "Toads, foxes, crows and snakes." Minato looked at me in shock, and I closed my eyes and dozed off, resting my head on Minato's shoulder. "My daughter has the strongest appeals and that's it." POV and Minato gently picked up the girl in his arms and disappeared, appearing in their common room. After putting the girl to bed, he disappeared again, appearing in his office. Naruko slept at home until the next morning. As soon as she woke up, she realized that she was alone at home and Minato's chakra felt very weak in the house, which means he did not spend the night at home. Smiling sadly, the girl got up and disappeared from the room, appearing in the Uzumaki quarter, where her mother and brother met her. What is it? Is Minato hurting you again? Naruko just smiled and shook her head and told him that he had not been home for several days. Kushina and Akira exchanged glances and sighed. Kushin's POV. What is it? Is Minato hurting you again? Naruko just smiled and shook her head and told him that he had not been home for several days. Akira and I exchanged glances and sighed. We knew perfectly well that he would stay up late to be with her for a few days on her birthday. Be patient a little, and everything will be fine. I said softly, looking at my daughter, who nodded. Okay, I'm off, mommy. I have something else to do. She looked away, and I frowned. Sasuke told me that when Naruko had something bad in mind, she always looked away. I hope you won't do anything wrong. Naruko shuddered and lowered her head down, and then turned around and left. I looked at Akira, who nodded and hid his chakra and followed her. POV and Naruko came home and locked herself in her room. Climbing into the bathroom, where warm water with foam was waiting for her, Naruko sat down there and took the blade in her hand. Looking at her hand, the girl began to drive the blade along it, looking at how blood flows into the water. Naruko recently liked to do this, removing the pain. Kurama and Jubi were silent and looked at their host with pain. Akira, sensing something wrong, ran into the house, and then into the bathroom, froze at the entrance, looking at how his beloved sister cut her veins while sitting in the water. Cursing, he picked up the unconscious girl in his arms and ran to the hospital. As soon as the doctors put her in the ward, Akira contacted everyone. Everyone came running to the hospital except Minato, who was not released. Kushina and Sasuke were sitting in the ward and holding Naruko's hands, and if Kushina was crying, then Sasuke restrained himself. Akira turned around and walked away towards the residence where his father was staying. Bursting into his office and scaring away the advisors, Akira grabbed his father by the scruff of the neck and disappeared, appearing at the hospital, near Naruko's room. Both went into the ward and saw a pale Naruko. Minato approached Naruko, asking everyone to come out. Minato? Naruko asked hoarsely, looking at her soulmate, who was crying while holding her hand. Forgive me, I tried so hard to do all my work to celebrate your birthday together that I completely forgot that you might be lonely. I'm sorry, Naruko, I'll fix it, I promise. Naruko smiled weakly and nodded. I do. POV Minato. Finally, I figured out all the documents, having had time for my baby's birthday. I just ran to the flower shop, where I bought a beautiful bouquet, and then went to the jewelry store, where I bought a ring that I ordered a month ago. Naruko and I decided to celebrate her birthday, just the two of us, and with the others later. When Naruko said this, I agreed, and so did the invitees. After going home, I saw a table set for two, with wine and candles. I froze in shock, but when my baby came down from the second floor, I froze completely. Short dress, orange color, just above the knee, white knee socks, red shoes. Having died, I approached Naruko and handed her a bouquet of flowers. Thank you, Minato. Smiling, I gave her my hand and led her to the table. You're fine today, Naruko. While having dinner together, we were talking about something. There is a box with a ring in my pocket and I was thinking when to propose to her. Is everything okay, Minato? She asked, coming up to me and sitting down next to me. Hugging her, I transferred her to my lap and pressed her to me, burying my face in her hair. Naruko, tell me. Getting up from my seat, I sat her back down and sat on my knee. Naruko, tell me, do you agree to become my wife? To share life with me and always be there for me? I looked at her and froze, seeing the tears in her eyes. Jumping up, I began to wipe. I agree, Minato. When I heard her consent, I picked her up in my arms and, laughing, began to circle around me. I'm happy, baby. I will be the best husband for you. Here Naruko frowned and sighed. Minato, take your time, I have something else to tell you. Call Sasuke, his parents, and mom here. We have something to tell you. I looked at Naruko in surprise, but nodded and went to send calls. An hour later, everyone was home and waiting. I was sitting across from Naruko and Sasuke, who took a seat next to her. Frowning at this, I flashed my blue eyes in their direction. Minato, don't be jealous of me. Naru, are you sure it's worth it now? Naruko nodded and leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs and leaning her head on her fist. And now, I'll tell you something. Everyone nodded except Biju and Sasuke, who knew everything. Sasuke immediately came up to me and called for a chair, seating me on it. I wanted to tell you who we are and why it looks older. I, Uzumaki Namikaze Naruko, the heroine of the 5 nations, who lost her parents on the day of her birth. My parents, Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato, sealed kurama in me. Throughout my life, I was an outcast in Konoha, as there was no one to protect me. My parents died, the Uzumaki clan was dead before I was born. The Uchiha clan could have taken me away, but the council, headed by Danzo, forbade them, saying that the Uchiha clan would become stronger if they had the weapons of the village. She pointed at herself. I didn't know who my parents were until I was 10 years old, until I went down into the subconscious and saw Kurama, with whom I made friends. Deciding to tear off the seal, I was stopped by the rest of my father's chakra, who told me who my parents were. Then there was a stream of missions, and so the time came to war. She sighed and looked away, and then Sasuke spoke up. Sasuke Uchiha, am the only surviving person in the clan, since my older brother, on the orders of Danzo, killed the entire clan that was preparing a coup. With Naruko, we became team number 7, we had a ballast named Haruno Sakura in our team, who decided that I was her property, although she was clanless and I was disgusted to be with her then. Our mentor was Kakashi Hatake, a former student of the 4th Hokage. As Naruko said, we carried out many missions until Akatsuki began to attack the world, to capture Biju, so that later to immerse the world in the eternal Tsukiyomi. A year before the battle, Naru and I started dating and she was pregnant, but during the war, we lost our child. There are photos and drawings on the walls of the house. This is our life with Naru. I do not know by what miracle, but we defeated Uchiha Obito, Kagyu and Madara Uchiha. But there was one problem, all their power went to Naruko. Sasuke sighed, and Naruko squeezed his palm, feeling how he intertwined our fingers. She smiled at him, nodding. The first plus, now I have Rinne, Sharingan and Teisenga. The strongest eyes in the world. The first ones were from the creator of the shinobi world, and the second ones are rare. The second plus, I was able to awaken several more types of chakras in myself, besides air. The chakras of wood, fire, and lightning were added to them. The third plus, I was able to seal the 10-tailed in myself, so I'm Jinchuriki Kurama and Jubi. So I got even more chakra. And now let's move on to the cons. The first minus is that there are so many chakras that my body just couldn't stand it. A little more time and the body would simply explode, destroying everything in its path. The second minus, Sasuke became the conductor of my chakra, which is why he also suffers. Then this damn trinity came to us and offered Sasuke to become my guide, since we were equally strong and could balance our forces. He agreed and could calmly help for 3 months, and then it got worse and I had to use my chakra all the time, but still there was no result. Then Kurama and Jubi offered us one thing. Shifting her gaze to Kurama, she smiled. We offered them to go to the past of another universe, since the past of their time could not be changed, and here we had a chance to save Naruko and Sasuke. For this transfer, almost the entire reserve of Naruko was needed, which made her life easier until she was 18, and then we would have come up with something. They took all their belongings and scrolls with the techniques of the Uzumaki and Uchiha clans and went to the Hokage and said they were going on a trip and did not know when they would return. After they went far away and hid their chakra, they sent the toad with a letter, and then they were transported to this time. Only we had to transfer them, but it turned out that in the middle of the transfer they heard the call and they responded to it. So it turned out that the bodies of Naruko and Sasuke of this time were inhabited by Naruko and Sasuke from the future of another parallel. I do not know what happened to the souls of those Sasuke and Naruko. When I woke up, Jubi and I called Naruko here and told the whole story of this body. The father constantly beat his daughter, Kushina loved, but tried not to show it in front of her husband. Only my older brother was always there and protected me. At her birth, the Kubi of that time damaged all the channels of the chakra, but my brother and I restored them. And then they showed this door with a seal. Since there was not enough chakra in Naru at that time, we decided to leave her, since she did not interfere with us, but now there is another choice, because Hokage put Itachi and Akira as her mentors so that they would follow her and understand if she stole some scroll, kurama side, and I turned pale. Recently, I, along with Itachi, Akira and Grandpa, opened the seals and the contents shocked us a little and threw us off balance. Your Naruko said she was manipulated. She was told that her family would be killed if she didn't bring the scroll, but she turned out to be a smart girl and copied the scroll and gave a fake one, and sealed the real one in herself, just in case something went wrong. That I listened and realized that I didn't care about the past of my soulmate, my Naruko. I don't care, Naruko. You are you. You're my soulmate, you're my fiancé. Winking at her, I smiled and caught her in my arms, settling her comfortably on my lap. POV end. When Naruko turned 20, she and Minato got married. She is now 25 years old. She is the mother of a wonderful son who has gone completely into his parents, having beautiful eyes like sapphires and blonde hair like gold. Although, if you look closely, their son is very similar to his father. They named their son Menma. He is now 5 years old. Minato gave his post to his daughter and she became the 5th Hokage. Naruko divided her chakra between them, which is why neither Minato, nor Menma, nor she will die and grow old. Menma was the pride of his parents. Absolutely everyone loved him, the best wife, whom the 4th idolizes, which is why there are rumors in the village that the 5th wins ropes from the 4th. Now, Naruko is pregnant again, this time she will give birth to a girl. By the way, during this time, Naruko became the head of the Uzumaki and Senju clans, beloved by the whole village, Hokage, for whom everyone will tear up any enemy. Under Naruko's leadership, the village flourished for many centuries until she got tired and gave her post to her son. Sasuke became Kushina's husband and now they are raising twins. Both are red-haired, and both have awakened Sharingan, have become geniuses in the clan. I'll be done with that.